Welcome back. Tonight, we're drifting through the most captivating mysteries that Five Nights at Freddy's has left unsolved. The questions that keep theorists awake, and the debates that have divided communities since the very first night guard clocked in. From golden bears harboring multiple souls, to debates over which year claimed a victim's frontal lobe. From purple zombies walking through shadows to digital rabbits that might not be who we think they are. And these are the theories that transform Scott Cawthon's horror franchise into an endless puzzle. The identity of Golden Freddy. One soul or two? In the quiet corners of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, one figure has remained more enigmatic than any other. Golden Freddy, that slumped yellow bear who materializes without warning, crashing games and haunting players with those hollow black eyes and that whispered phrase, "It's me." For years, the community has wrestled with a question that seems simple on its surface, but unfolds into layers of complexity the deeper you dig. Who possesses Golden Freddy? Is it one vengeful spirit, or could two souls somehow share this spectral form? The most widely accepted answer centers on a name discovered through puzzle solving in the survival logbook. Cassidy. This child, one of the 5 victims of the missing children incident in 1985, appears to be the primary force inhabiting Golden Freddy's consciousness. The evidence supporting this connection forms a compelling case that has convinced the majority of theorists. In Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, the completion ending reveals 6 gravestones on a hill, 4 with clear names and 2 obscured. When players overlaid this image with the bad ending from Five Nights at Freddy's 3, showing the animatronic heads with single lights, a pattern emerged. Gabriel possessed Freddy, and Jeremy inhabited Bonnie, Susie claimed Chica, and Fritz animated Foxy. The 5th victim, represented by that hidden gravestone, corresponded with Golden Freddy's position. The survival logbook provided the key to unlocking that hidden name. Throughout its pages, faded text appears, asking questions that seem directed at someone else. When players followed the clues, using incorrectly numbered pages where my name appeared in ghostly writing, they discovered coordinates within a word search. These coordinates spelled out Cassidy when connected properly. The same word search contained multiple instances of "it's me," the phrase Golden Freddy has been associated with since the very first game. This connection between the hidden name and Golden Freddy's signature message created what seemed like definitive proof. But the story grows more intricate when we consider the dual soul theory, sometimes called Golden Duo or Golden Both. And this theory proposes that Golden Freddy doesn't house just one spirit, but 2. Cassidy, yes, but also the crying child from Five Nights at Freddy's 4, that young boy whose skull was crushed by Fredbear's jaws during his birthday party in 1983. The evidence supporting this theory comes from multiple angles, each adding weight to what initially seemed like speculation. The survival logbook itself hints at this duality. Within its pages, 2 distinct entities appear to communicate. The faded text asks questions like, "Do you have dreams? And what do you see?" While altered text, created by changing existing words in the book, responds. These 2 forms of writing suggest 2 separate spirits attempting to reach out, possibly communicating with each other through the pages. Michael Afton, the logbook's owner, writes in red pen, making him a third voice in this strange conversation. The implications are fascinating. If the faded text represents Cassidy and the altered text represents the crying child, they're both reaching out from within the same entity, Golden Freddy. Consider the mechanics of possession as established in the Fazbear Frights books. In The Man in Room 1280, we encountered the Stitch Wraith, an endoskeleton possessed by multiple souls simultaneously. Andrew and Jake both inhabit this single animatronic, with Jake controlling its movements, while Andrew provides the vengeful energy that powers it. William Afton's consciousness also lingers within, trapped by Andrew's refusal to let him die. This story establishes a clear precedent within the franchise's expanded universe. Multiple souls can indeed possess a single animatronic, with different spirits controlling different aspects or existing in a shared space. The crying child's connection to Golden Freddy comes through subtle clues scattered across multiple games. In Five Nights at Freddy's World, an intermediary game that Scott Cawthon has described as important to understanding the lore, we see a series of gravestones. 6 graves appear near Purple Guy, representing the missing children and Charlie, all victims of William Afton, but one grave stands apart from the others, positioned near Fredbear, away from the group, and this isolated grave could represent the crying child, suggesting his spirit found its way to the golden bear that killed him, separate from but parallel to the missing children's fates. In Ultimate Custom Night, the presence of Golden Freddy takes on particular significance. This game, widely interpreted as William Afton's personal hell, features Golden Freddy as one of the most dangerous and prominent threats. The character's behavior and importance in this nightmare scenario suggests something beyond a typical vengeful spirit. Some theorists propose that Cassidy, as the one you should not have killed, keeps Afton trapped in this purgatory, while the crying child, Afton's own son, provides the emotional weight that makes this punishment so perfectly cruel. A father tormented by the child he failed to protect, alongside the victims he deliberately murdered. The phrase "it's me" itself carries potential dual meaning. In Five Nights at Freddy's 1, when this message appears on walls and screens, often in connection with Golden Freddy's presence, it could be the crying child attempting to communicate with his brother Michael, who works as the night guard. The crying child trying to say, "It's me, your brother," reaching out across the barrier between life and death. And this interpretation adds emotional depth to what could otherwise be just another creepy game mechanic, transforming jump scares into tragic family reunions. The debate over Cassidy's gender adds another layer to this mystery. In the novel trilogy, Cassidy is described as a girl with long black hair. The survival logbook features a drawing of a girl with black hair in pigtails with golden hair ties, receiving cake from the puppet, seemingly depicting the happiest day minigame where Golden Freddy's soul finally finds peace. This imagery connects the black-haired girl to both Cassidy and Golden Freddy. However, in Ultimate Custom Night, the face that appears when Golden Freddy attacks shows a young boy with blonde hair. In the 2023 movie adaptation, the spirit possessing Golden Freddy also appears as a blonde boy, and this inconsistency has sparked endless debates about whether Cassidy's gender changes between continuities, or if different spirits manifest in Golden Freddy across different timelines. Some theorists propose a middle ground. Perhaps Cassidy is the primary consciousness, the dominant spirit who controls Golden Freddy's actions and appears most prominently. The crying child might exist as a secondary presence, less active but still there, contributing to the animatronic's power and nature. And this would explain why Golden Freddy appears so different from the other possessed animatronics. While Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy move around the building following predictable patterns, Golden Freddy simply materializes, sitting slumped in your office with no explanation for how he got there. This ethereal quality, this ability to bypass normal physical rules, might stem from having two souls rather than one, making the entity more supernatural than mechanical. The evidence against the dual soul theory deserves consideration as well. In the ending of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, when the souls are finally freed, Golden Freddy's head fades out completely. If two souls inhabited the suit, wouldn't it fade only partially when one soul departed, leaving evidence of the second spirit? The complete dissolution suggests a single presence moving on. Additionally, throughout the games, Golden Freddy is consistently treated as one of the 5 missing children victims, grouped with Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, and Fritz. Introducing a 6th soul, the crying child, disrupts this established pattern. The location of the crying child's death also complicates matters. He died at Fredbear's Family Diner, a sister location to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, during a birthday party in 1983. The puppet, Charlie's possessed form, granted life to the missing children by placing their bodies in the animatronic suits. But the puppet wasn't present at Fredbear's Family Diner. How would the crying child's spirit have attached to Fredbear, later known as Golden Freddy, without the puppet's intervention? Perhaps the answer lies in the nature of his death itself. The crying child died inside Fredbear's mouth, his tears and trauma potentially creating a connection that didn't require the puppet's gift. His possession could have been spontaneous, born from the agony of his final moments. As the community continues debating Golden Freddy's true nature, new evidence emerges with each game release. The recent Return to the Pit interactive novel describes the final missing child receiving cake as a girl with curly hair, matching descriptions of Cassidy from the novels. This seems to place Cassidy definitively among the 1985 victims, separate from the crying child. Yet the debate refuses to die, sustained by the franchise's deliberate ambiguity and Scott Cawthon's tendency to leave multiple interpretations viable. What makes this mystery so compelling isn't just the question of one soul versus two, but what it means for the broader story. If Golden Freddy houses both Cassidy and the crying child, it transforms the animatronic from a simple vessel of vengeance into a meeting point for two of the franchise's most tragic figures. One child murdered by William Afton's deliberate cruelty, another killed by his negligence and his son's bullying. Together, they would represent different faces of Afton's evil, his willingness to kill innocents alongside his failure to protect his own family. This thematic resonance elevates the theory beyond mere puzzle solving, giving it narrative weight that enriches the entire story. In the end, whether you believe in Golden Cassidy or Golden Duo, the mystery of Golden Freddy's possession remains one of Five Nights at Freddy's most captivating debates. It's a question that invites constant re-examination, where new game releases and book publications might finally provide definitive answers or simply add more layers to an already complex mystery. And perhaps that ambiguity is intentional, keeping theorists engaged and ensuring that Golden Freddy remains as enigmatic in the community's discussions as he is in those darkened office spaces, and always there, always watching, always asking us to figure out just who is saying "it's me." The Bite debate. Was it 1983 or 1987? Few questions in Five Nights at Freddy's lore have sparked more passionate debate than this deceptively simple query about calendar years. The community knows that an animatronic bit someone's frontal lobe. Phone Guy mentions it in the very first game and establishing the byte of 87 as a pivotal incident in Fazbear Entertainment's dark history. But when Five Nights at Freddy's 4 showed us a birthday party gone horrifically wrong, with a child's head crushed inside Fredbear's jaws, theorists immediately wondered if they were finally witnessing this infamous event. Then the game displayed 1983 on a television screen, and the community erupted into arguments that continue to this day. The confusion stems from Scott Cawthon's deliberate misdirection during Five Nights at Freddy's 4's release. Leading up to the game, teaser images contained code filled with 8s and 7s, clearly referencing 1987 and priming players to expect answers about the byte of 87. One of Foxy's eyes in a teaser literally contained 87 within the design, seemingly pointing toward him as the culprit. The community prepared for a revelation, is expecting to finally see the event Phone Guy had referenced years earlier. Then came the twist. The Plush Trap teaser showed 83 in its source code. The Fredbear and Friends television show displayed 1983 as a copyright date. Scott had pulled a classic misdirection, and theorists scrambled to make sense of it. The evidence for two separate incidents, one in 1983 and another in 1987, forms a comprehensive case. In the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 training tapes, Phone Guy mentions an unfortunate incident at a sister location involving multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures. This incident resulted in the decommissioning of all spring lock suits. The timing and nature of this event match perfectly with what we witness in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. The crying child, tormented by his brother and friends, gets his head forced into Fredbear's mouth. His tears and struggling loosen the spring locks, causing them to snap shut and crush his skull. And this tragedy happens at Fredbear's family diner, which Phone Guy explicitly calls a sister location to Freddy's, and it directly involves a spring lock failure. The timing aligns with 1983, but this incident, devastating as it is, doesn't match Phone Guy's description of the byte of 87 in crucial ways. Phone Guy states that the 87 victims survived, losing their frontal lobe but continuing to live. The crying child dies. We hear the flatline sound at the end of Night 6, confirming his death in the hospital. These can't be the same event if one victim died and the other survived. Additionally, Phone Guy mentions that after the byte of 87, animatronics were no longer allowed to walk around during the day and were restricted to the stage. This policy change makes sense at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but it wouldn't explain why animatronics at a completely different location would be affected by an incident at Fredbear's family diner. The interactive novel The Week Before provides additional confirmation. Ralph, the protagonist working at a Freddy's location in 1987, enters the code 1983 into a keypad and hears audio of a byte incident. He specifically refers to this as the Big Byte, noting it was called that until another byte happened in 1987. And this explicit statement from canon material establishes two separate incidents beyond reasonable doubt. The byte of 83 claimed the crying child at Fredbear's family diner. The byte of 87 injured someone else at a different location 4 years later. So if the crying child's death in 1983 wasn't the byte of 87, what was? The most popular theory points to the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which takes place in November of 1987, and Jeremy Fitzgerald works as the night guard at this location. And on Night 6, Phone Guy informs him that he's being moved to the day shift for a birthday party the following day. Phone Guy emphasizes that Jeremy should stay close to the animatronics and ensure nothing goes wrong. The ominous nature of this instruction, combined with the timing, suggests that something did go wrong. Very wrong. The culprit in this scenario remains hotly debated, but Mangle emerges as the leading suspect. This destroyed version of Foxy, rebuilt by children and left as a take-apart and put-back-together attraction, possesses the sharp teeth and aggressive behavior that could easily result in a bite injury. In Ultimate Custom Night, Toy Chica makes a suspicious comment about the player having a beak lodged in your forehead, which some interpret as a hint that she committed the bite of 87. Others argue for different animatronics based on behavior patterns and symbolism, but Mangle's mangled state and prominent position in the sequel make her the most commonly cited suspect. The victim's identity presents its own mystery. Many theorists believe Jeremy Fitzgerald himself suffered the bite, explaining why he was transferred to the day shift and why we never see him again after night 6. This theory suggests Jeremy survived with severe frontal lobe damage, matching Phone Guy's description, while also explaining his absence from the franchise going forward. Others propose that Fritz Smith, the Night 7 guard who gets fired for tampering with animatronics and odor, might have been involved somehow, though the evidence for his connection remains circumstantial. The medical implications of frontal lobe damage add disturbing realism to this fictional incident. The frontal lobe controls personality, decision-making, emotional regulation, and fear responses. And Phone Guy mentions in Five Nights at Freddy's 1 that it's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe. While this statement oversimplifies neuroscience, it's true that frontal lobe damage doesn't necessarily cause death, though it dramatically affects a person's quality of life. The victim of the bite of 87 would have survived physically, but likely suffered profound cognitive and emotional changes, and this medical detail helps theorists distinguish between the two bites. The crying child's injury in 83 was more severe, crushing his entire skull and causing death. The 87 victim lost specifically their frontal lobe and survived. Some theorists resist accepting two separate bite incidents, arguing that it unnecessarily complicates the law. They propose alternative explanations for the apparent contradictions. One theory suggests the 1983 date on the television represents when the Fredbear and Friends show first aired, not when the minigame events occur. The show could be a rerun playing in 1987, with the crying child's death happening during the same year as the other bite. This theory attempts to collapse both incidents into one, maintaining the bite of 87 as the singular traumatic event Phone Guy referenced. However, this rerun theory faces significant obstacles. Phone Guy states in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 that Fredbear's Family Diner has been closed for years, which places its closure well before 1987. If the restaurant had been shuttered for multiple years, why would a birthday party with active animatronics be happening there? The location visible in the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 minigames clearly shows operational status, with children attending parties and animatronics performing. And this doesn't match a restaurant that's been abandoned for years. Scott Cawthon himself provided oblique confirmation of the two-bite interpretation. In a Steam post responding to Game Theory's video about Five Nights at Freddy's 4, Scott wrote, "Some of your most clever viewers have pointed out that you overlooked one crucial detail regarding Matthew Patrick's argument that the minigames depicted the bite of 87. Scott didn't explicitly state what that crucial detail was, but many theorists interpreted this as confirmation that the bite shown in the game was not the one in 87, pointing instead to the evidence of 1983. The debate continues partly because Scott Cawthon deliberately structured Five Nights at Freddy's 4 to mislead players. The 8s and 7s in the teasers, the focus on the bite incident itself, the community's anticipation of finally learning about 87. All of this was carefully orchestrated misdirection. Scott wanted players to assume they were seeing the bite of 87, then pulled the rug out with that 1983 reveal. This twist perfectly captured the franchise's approach to storytelling, where assumptions are deliberately challenged and nothing is quite what it seems. The two-bite theory also provides narrative symmetry that enriches the overall story. The bite of 83 represents William Afton's failure as a father, his negligence allowing his son to be tormented and killed. This personal tragedy might have been the catalyst that pushed William toward his later murders, attempting to bring his son back or seeking some form of twisted immortality to avoid his own mortality. The bite of 87, 4 years later, represents the consequences of William's crimes coming home to roost, as the possessed animatronics he created became increasingly aggressive toward adults, eventually attacking someone during a birthday party, much like the party where the crying child died. From a game design perspective, having two separate bites allows Scott to explore different aspects of tragedy. The bite of 83 is intimate and personal, a family drama that destroys the Afton household. The bite of 87 is corporate and public, the moment when Fazbear Entertainment's dark secrets begin catching up with them, are forcing policy changes and permanent restrictions on animatronic behavior. Both incidents serve important narrative functions, and neither diminishes the other's impact. As new games and books release, evidence continues mounting in favor of the two-bite interpretation. The week before explicitly confirms it. Return to the Pit references events in 1985, without contradicting the 83 incident. Their sister location allows players to enter 1983 as a code to access security footage of the crying child's bedroom, reinforcing that year's significance. These details accumulate, creating a timeline where both incidents have their place without contradiction. Yet the debate persists in certain corners of the community, kept alive by those who prefer simpler explanations or who find evidence the majority has dismissed. And this ongoing discussion exemplifies what makes Five Nights at Freddy's theorizing so engaging. Even when evidence seems overwhelming, alternate interpretations remain possible, sustained by the franchise's layered storytelling and Scott Cawthon's love of misdirection. Whether you believe in two separate bites or maintain that they're somehow the same incident viewed from different angles, the mystery remains central to understanding Fazbear Entertainment's history. These moments of horror, when animatronics meant to bring joy instead brought tragedy, represent the franchise's core themes. Technology run amok, family entertainment turned nightmare, the thin line between life and death in a world where spring locks can fail and souls can possess machinery. The bite of 83 and the bite of 87, whether one event or two, stand as grim reminders of what happens when safety takes a back seat to profit and when children pay the price for adult failures. A Michael Afton's true journey, the walking corpse. Theory of all the Afton family members, Michael remains the most mysterious, despite being the protagonist of multiple games. We play as him through most of the franchise, yet his exact nature, motivations, and ultimate fate spark endless debates. Is he Mike Schmidt from the first game? Is he the guard in Five Nights at Freddy's 3? Most controversially, is he actually dead throughout most of his appearances, a walking corpse animated by Remnant, and shambling through pizzerias on a quest to find his father. The answer to these questions shapes our understanding of the entire franchise's emotional core. The journey begins in 1983 with a cruel brother wearing a foxy mask. Michael Afton, as confirmed by The Week Before, was the older brother who tormented the crying child. He locked his younger sibling in rooms, scared him with animatronic masks, and ultimately participated in the prank that crushed his brother's skull inside Fredbear's jaws. This act defines Michael's character arc. Everything that follows stems from his guilt, his need to make amends for a moment of bullying that went catastrophically wrong. Understanding Michael means understanding that he's driven by regret, spending the rest of his life trying to fix what he broke. But when does the rest of his life become the rest of his existence beyond life? The answer lies in the underground facility of Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals, where Sister Location's events unfold. We know from the custom night cutscene that Michael ventures into this facility following some instruction from his father. The exact nature of William Afton's message remains ambiguous, but it convinces Michael to take a job as a technician in the depths beneath Circus Baby's pizza world. Over 5 nights, Michael navigates maintenance tasks, while the fun-time animatronics gradually reveal their true nature. These aren't simple entertainment robots. They're designed to capture and kill children, equipped with claws, voice mimicry, and artificial intelligence that allows them to learn and adapt. Circus Baby, possessed by Michael's sister Elizabeth, pretends to help him survive, guiding him deeper into the facility while coordinating with the other fun times. On the final night, they lure Michael to the scooping room under false pretenses. The scooper, we learn from blueprints hidden in the private room, was designed for remnant injection. This device doesn't just scoop out endoskeletons for maintenance. It injects molten remnant, the supernatural substance that binds souls to metal, into animatronics to give them a form of artificial life. When the fun-time animatronics scoop out Michael's internal organs, removing everything that makes his body function, they're not just killing him, they're preparing him as a vessel. Ennard, the amalgamation of all the fun-time endoskeletons twisted together into a single entity, climbs inside Michael's hollowed body and wears him like a suit. This graphic horror, one of the franchise's most disturbing revelations, shows us Michael's corpse walking down a street, going through daily routines, while Ennard puppets his flesh from within. His skin turns grey, then purple, as decay sets in. Neighbours notice something wrong. This can't continue. In the most shocking moment of Sister Location, we see Michael collapse in front of his house. His eyes have turned purple, a colour associated with corpses in the franchise. Ennard's wires emerge from his mouth in a torrent of metal and rot, and the tangled mass of endoskeletons escapes into the sewers, leaving Michael's emptied body lying in the street. By every reasonable measure, Michael Afton should be dead. No one survives having their internal organs removed. No one survives a week of decomposition. The cutscene should end here, with Michael's death confirming his fate. Instead, Michael stands up. His purple, decayed form rises from the pavement and continues walking. In a monologue delivered over a black screen showing the ruins of a burned building, Michael's voice returns. "And they thought I was you," he says, speaking to his father. The animatronics mistook him for William Afton, attacking him because of his resemblance to their killer. Michael reveals his current state. "I should be dead, but I'm not." This simple statement transforms everything we thought we knew about him. Michael Afton has become something other than human, something that should not exist but does. The zombie Michael theory proposes that remnant, in the same substance William injected into the Funtime animatronics, now keeps Michael animated despite his death. When Ennard wore Michael's body, the remnant inside the amalgamation transferred to his corpse, binding his soul to his own decaying flesh in an inverse of typical possession. Instead of a soul possessing an animatronic, Michael's soul possesses his own dead body, sustained by supernatural forces that prevent his consciousness from moving on. And this explanation accounts for several strange details across multiple games. In the first 5 Nights at Freddy's, the death screen shows what appears to be the player character stuffed inside a Freddy Fazbear suit, eyes visible through the animatronic sockets. The image has a distinctly purple tint. If Michael is already a purple corpse by the time he takes the job as Mike Schmidt, this death screen makes a different kind of sense. His purple, dead flesh showing through Freddy's eye sockets. The survival logbook provides crucial evidence connecting these dots. The book, used by the security guard from 5 Nights at Freddy's 1, contains doodles and notes in red ink. These notes reference locations and events from Sister Location, including drawings of exotic butters, the silly prize Michael receives in the game's fake ending. The logbook also features a page asking about recent dreams, where someone has drawn Nightmare Fredbear. This suggests the same person who worked at Sister Location later worked at the 5 Nights at Freddy's 1 location. Michael Afton as Mike Schmidt becomes the only explanation that connects these games coherently. But this raises questions about Michael's timeline. If Sister Location happens before 5 Nights at Freddy's 1, and Michael is already a purple zombie during the first game, how does he interact with the world? The logbook implies he receives paychecks. It's suggesting Fazbear Entertainment considers him a normal employee. Does Michael wear makeup to hide his decay? Does he avoid daylight and human contact, working only night shifts where no one sees him clearly? The game never addresses these practical concerns, leaving theorists to imagine how a walking corpse maintains even a semblance of normal life. The debate intensifies around 5 Nights at Freddy's 3's guard. Many theorists believe Michael works as the security guard at Fazbear's Fright and the horror attraction built around the franchise's dark history. His monologue in Sister Location mentions finding his father, and Springtrap's appearance in Fazbear's Fright suggests this is where Michael finally catches up to William. The burned building shown during the monologue could be Fazbear's Fright after the fire that ends 5 Nights at Freddy's 3, with Michael potentially starting the blaze to destroy his father once and for all. However, this theory faces challenges. In 5 Nights at Freddy's 3, the guard demonstrably breathes heavily when panicking, clearly affected by lack of oxygen when ventilation fails. Would a dead man need to breathe? The guard also seems unfamiliar with the animatronics, panicking and struggling through each night. If Michael deliberately came to Fazbear's Fright to find his father, wouldn't he be more prepared? Additionally, if Phone Dude mentions potentially putting the guard in a costume as part of the attraction, why would Michael need a costume when his own decaying state would probably attract more horror tourists than any suit? Some theorists propose that Remnant works inconsistently, allowing Michael to maintain certain biological functions while being technically dead. Heat affects Remnant's power, weakening it in high temperatures. In Pizzeria Simulator, if the office becomes too hot, Michael passes out, his consciousness fading as the heat disrupts the Remnant, keeping him animated. At this heat vulnerability suggests Michael isn't invulnerable despite being undead. He still needs to breathe, still feels discomfort, still blacks out under certain conditions. He's not a supernatural monster immune to physical laws, but rather a human consciousness artificially sustained in a dead body through Remnant's unusual properties. The final piece of Michael's journey comes in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, where Henry Emily orchestrates one last trap. Michael, and applying for a management position, unknowingly walks into a carefully constructed maze designed to gather all remaining possessed animatronics. Henry's speech at the end addresses Michael directly, calling him a brave volunteer and suggesting there was an exit, a way out. But Henry knew Michael didn't want it. Michael chose to stay, to burn with the others, to finally end his undead existence and free the souls trapped in Remnant's grip. The final cutscene shows gravestones fading in soft light, representing the souls finally finding peace. Michael's grave doesn't appear among them, but neither does it suggest he survived. His sacrifice was complete. His remnant sustained consciousness finally released by the fire's heat. After years of walking as a corpse, driven by guilt and the need to stop his father's legacy, Michael Afton found his ending in flames. The zombie Michael theory transforms him from a simple protagonist into a tragic figure whose very existence defies natural law. He's a son trying to right his wrongs, willing to endure literal death and decay to protect others from his family's sins. Every night he spends fending off animatronics. Every moment he continues existing despite being dead represents his penance for the brother he failed to save. This interpretation elevates Michael from a blank slate player character into one of the franchise's most compelling figures. A zombie with a conscience, a corpse driven by love and guilt. Not everyone accepts the zombie theory, of course. Some argue Michael survived the scooping in a more conventional way, perhaps through medical intervention or remnant healing properties that aren't fully understood. Others suggest different timelines, where sister location happens later in the chronology, eliminating contradictions about Michael's state during earlier games. These alternate interpretations maintain their own followings, sustained by ambiguities in the timeline and conflicting evidence across games. But the image of Michael Afton, purple and decaying, shambling through darkened pizzerias, with his dead eyes searching for his father, has captured the fandom's imagination in a way few theories have. It's dark, it's disturbing, and it's somehow deeply emotional. A boy who made a terrible mistake, who lost his brother to his own cruelty, who died trying to save his sister, and who continued anyway, refusing to let death stop him from making things right. Michael Afton, the walking corpse, the purple guy who isn't his father, the brave volunteer who finally found peace in flames. His journey remains one of Five Nights at Freddy's most haunting mysteries, a story of redemption written in decay. And the puppet's role, guardian angel of possessed animatronics. In the shadows of Five Nights at Freddy's lore, one figure stands apart from the typical possessed animatronic. The puppet, that slender marionette with its painted face and tears streaked down its cheeks, operates under different rules than the others. While most haunted machines attack any adult they encounter, driven by confusion and primal fear, the puppet demonstrates purpose and awareness that suggests something more. Understanding the puppet means understanding possession itself, how it started, and why some spirits retain more humanity than others. The puppet's story begins with Charlie Emily, daughter of Henry Emily, one of Fazbear Entertainment's founders. Unlike William Afton, who seems to have viewed his children as extensions of himself or tools for his experiments, Henry loved his daughter genuinely. This love manifested in his creations, particularly the security puppet, as an animatronic designed specifically to protect Charlie during her visits to the pizzeria. Linked to a green bracelet Charlie wore, the security puppet would activate if she strayed too far from safe areas, ensuring she remained within the building's protected zones. The system should have worked perfectly. A parent's ingenuity combined with mechanical precision, ensuring his daughter's safety amid the chaos of a children's restaurant. But systems can fail. Locks can malfunction. And on one rainy night in 1983, tragedy found a way. Charlie ended up locked outside the pizzeria, trapped in an alley behind the building, while a birthday party continued inside. The security puppet, detecting that Charlie had breached its protected perimeter through her bracelet signal, broke free from its confinement and ventured out to find her. But the rain complicated everything. Water and electronics rarely mix well, and the security puppet's delicate mechanisms began failing in the downpour. Sparks flew as circuits shorted. The puppet's movements became erratic, then sluggish, as water invaded its systems. Meanwhile, in the alley, William Afton found Charlie. The exact circumstances of this first murder remain ambiguous in the games, but the outcome is clear. Charlie died in that rain-soaked alley, the first of William Afton's victims, killed while Henry's protection system crawled helplessly through puddles. The security puppet reached Charlie's body just as its own systems failed completely. It collapsed beside her, circuits dead, lying in the rain next to the small corpse. In that moment, something unprecedented occurred. Charlie's soul, freshly freed from her body, attached itself to the puppet that had tried so desperately to save her. This wasn't a forced possession like we'd see later with the missing children. This was organic, natural in the way supernatural phenomena can be natural. Charlie's spirit found refuge in the very machine designed to protect her, seeking shelter in its mechanical shell. This first possession fundamentally differs from those that follow. When the missing children's souls inhabit Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, they do so through the puppet's intervention. In the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, we see this process play out. The puppet floats through a darkened room containing 4 lifeless bodies and 4 animatronic heads. One by one, the puppet places the heads onto the bodies, a ritual that appears to transfer the children's souls into their mechanical shells. The puppet understands possession instinctively because she experienced it herself, and she uses this knowledge to prevent the murdered children from simply vanishing into death. She grants them a chance at continued existence, however dark that existence becomes. The 5th child's possession happens differently. After giving gifts to the first 4, the puppet prepares for the last child. But before the ritual completes, a 5th body appears, and Golden Freddy's image jump scares the player, ending the minigame abruptly. This interrupted process might explain why Golden Freddy behaves so differently from the others, more spectral and less physical. The puppet's intervention was incomplete. I'm creating a haunting rather than a full possession. But why does the puppet help these children? What drives her to grant them this half-life in metal bodies? Some theorists propose guilt. Charlie, speaking through the puppet, might blame herself for being in that alley, for requiring protection, for somehow contributing to the circumstances that led to her death. She projects this guilt outward, ensuring other murdered children don't face oblivion. She can't save them from death, but she can save them from being forgotten, can give their souls anchors in the physical world. Others suggest the puppet acts from pure compassion. Charlie Emily, by all accounts a sweet child, simply couldn't bear watching other children suffer her fate. When William Afton murdered 5 more kids at the pizzeria, stuffing their bodies into animatronic suits, Charlie felt their confusion and fear. Her response was to help them, to share the strange existence she'd discovered, and to ensure they had agency and presence even in death. The puppet becomes a guardian of lost souls, a bridge between life and death, who helps murdered children transcend their mortality. The puppet's behavior throughout the games supports this guardian interpretation. In Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the puppet emerges from a prize box, drawn by the music that plays from it. If the music winds down, the puppet escapes, drifting through the building with eerie grace before eventually reaching the office and attacking the player. But this attack isn't random violence. The puppet moves with purpose, drawn toward adults who might represent danger to the children she protects. She's not confused like the other animatronics. She knows exactly what she's doing. The tear streaks painted on the puppet's face carry symbolic weight that resonates throughout the franchise. These aren't just decorative elements. They represent Charlie's tears in that rainy alley, her final moments of fear and sadness before death. But they also represent ongoing grief, the puppet's eternal sorrow for the children she helps but cannot save from their fates. Every spirit she guides into an animatronic shell is another child who died violently, another innocent soul denied a normal life. The puppet facilitates their continued existence, but this is a bitter gift, only trapping them in mechanical bodies that can neither grow nor age. Henry Emily's words in Pizzeria Simulator acknowledge his daughter's role and his own failure to protect her. He calls Charlie's death a wound first inflicted on me, recognizing it as the beginning of all the horror that followed. If Charlie had lived, if the security puppet had reached her in time, the missing children might have simply died, their souls moving on naturally. Charlie's possession taught the world of Five Nights at Freddy's that souls could inhabit machinery, and this lesson enabled everything William Afton did afterward. Henry carries this guilt. Knowing his daughter's fate inadvertently showed his partner how to create possessed animatronics deliberately. The puppet's connection to Lefty in Pizzeria Simulator adds another layer to her story. Lefty, a black bear animatronic designed by Henry, exists specifically to capture and contain the puppet. The name Lefty even references this purpose, as the bear's left eye is missing, replaced with a bright orange light, while the right eye remains dark. Henry created Lefty to safely transport Charlie's spirit to the final location, where he could free her soul through fire. The puppet willingly enters Lefty's containment, suggesting some level of communication between Henry and his daughter's spirit, a mutual understanding that this imprisonment serves a greater purpose. And in the final conflagration of Pizzeria Simulator, Henry addresses Charlie directly. His speech acknowledges her sacrifice, her choice to linger in the world to help other lost souls, her refusal to abandon the children she'd granted half-life. He thanks her for her service and apologizes for taking so long to free her. The graves shown in the ending include Charlie's, positioned on a hill overlooking the others, a guardian watching over those she helped even in death. Her task is complete, and her protection no longer needed. She can finally rest. The Happiest Day minigame from Five Nights at Freddy's 3 shows the culmination of the puppet's purpose. In a celebratory setting, children gather for a party, their animatronic masks falling away to reveal their human faces beneath. The puppet appears as a little girl, presumably Charlie, giving cake to the child who becomes Golden Freddy. One by one, the masks drop, the children freed from their mechanical prisons. The party represents their release, their transcendence, the end of their haunting. The puppet orchestrated this liberation, bringing together the pieces needed for these souls to finally move on. Some theorists debate whether the puppet should be considered purely good or morally ambiguous. While her intentions seem noble, trapping souls in animatronic bodies for years could be viewed as cruel. Even if done with good intentions, the missing children might have preferred moving on naturally rather than spending decades haunting mechanical shells, attacking security guards who had nothing to do with their murders. The puppet made a choice for them, imposing her solution without consent, however impossible consent would have been under the circumstances. Others point out that without the puppet's intervention, William Afton's crimes might have gone unpunished indefinitely. The possessed animatronics, while dangerous to innocent security guards, also ensured Fazbear Entertainment couldn't simply ignore or cover up the murders. The haunting kept the missing children's existence present, refused to let their deaths be forgotten, and ultimately contributed to William's capture in the spring locksuit. The puppet's gift, dark as it was, served justice in a world where normal justice failed. The emotional core of the puppet's story lies in this tension between protection and imprisonment. Charlie Emily, speaking through tears painted on a mask, spends years shepherding dead children's souls, unable to save them but refusing to abandon them. She's the first victim who becomes the guardian of all victims that follow, a little girl who died alone in the rain and decided no other child would be alone in death. Her presence throughout the franchise serves as a reminder that even in Five Nights at Freddy's darkest moments, compassion exists, and that not all possessed animatronics seek violence for violence's sake. Understanding the puppet means understanding that possession in this franchise isn't a simple binary of good or evil. It's tragic, complicated, born from the collision of mechanical innovation and human cruelty, sustained by a child who died trying to be protected and now protects others the only way she knows how. The security puppet failed its original purpose, but found a new one, and Charlie Emily, a forever crying tears of paint and shadow, watches over the souls she helped until the moment when fire finally frees them all. William Afton's motivations, the man behind the murders. Every horror franchise needs a monster, and Five Nights at Freddy's found its monster in William Afton, a man whose crimes span decades and whose obsessions transcend death itself. But monsters aren't born in vacuums. They have reasons, however twisted, for their actions. Understanding why William Afton killed children, experimented on souls, and pursued immortality through such grotesque means has become one of the franchise's most debated questions. Is he simply evil, a psychopath who kills because he enjoys it? Or does his behavior stem from deeper motivations, grief transformed into madness, ambition poisoned by obsession? The simplest interpretation paints William as pure malice. In this reading, he kills because he wants to, because children's suffering brings him pleasure, because he's fundamentally broken in ways that preclude redemption or understanding. This interpretation finds support in his actions' deliberate cruelty. He didn't kill quickly or mercifully. He lured children with promises, used costumes they trusted, stuffed their bodies into animatronic suits where they'd be hidden, and showed no remorse across multiple games. His famous line, "I always come back," delivered with obvious pleasure, I suggest someone who embraces his monstrosity, who takes pride in his persistence and power. But Scott Cawthon's storytelling rarely embraces simplicity, and William's characterization hints at more complex motivations buried beneath the murders. Several theories attempt to excavate these deeper drivers, explaining how a man involved in creating family entertainment became a child murderer. The most prominent theory connects William's crimes to the death of his youngest son, the crying child whose skull was crushed in the bite of 83. This incident, occurring at Fredbear's family diner, where William co-founded the franchise, would have represented the ultimate failure for a father. His son died in one of his own creations, killed by the very entertainment he'd helped design. How did William react to this tragedy? The Fredbear plush that appears throughout Five Nights at Freddy's 4 offers clues. This plush, as seen in multiple locations around the crying child's house, speaks to the boy with William's voice, offering warnings and seeming reassurances. "I will put you back together," the plush says in the final hospital scene. A promise whose meaning has launched countless theories. Did William mean this literally? Was he already contemplating ways to resurrect his son, to reverse death through the technology he'd helped create? And the underground facility revealed in Sister Location's private room connects directly to the crying child's bedroom, suggesting William monitored his son obsessively, using surveillance equipment hidden throughout their home. The experimentation rooms, where fear gas induced nightmares in subjects, might have been William's twisted attempt to understand or recreate his son's trauma. If William believed fear and agony held power over life and death, untesting these forces on other children might have seemed justified in his mind, necessary sacrifices to understand the mechanics of mortality. This grief-driven interpretation positions William's first murder, Charlie Emily, as a response to his son's death. Unable to cope with losing his child, William directed his rage at Henry Emily, his business partner, who still had a living daughter. Jealousy and hatred combined, driving William to take from Henry what death had taken from William. Had Charlie died in that rainy alley, not because William wanted to kill children in general, but because he wanted Henry to feel the same pain he felt. This first murder was personal, targeted, born from the twisted logic of a grieving father who'd lost his mind. But murder, once committed, changes a person. If the grief theory holds, William discovered something in Charlie's death, and perhaps witnessing her possession of the security puppet, or understanding that souls could linger beyond physical death. This revelation transformed his motivations from revenge to experimentation. If souls could inhabit machinery, could they be manipulated, controlled, transferred? Could he bring his son back by understanding these mechanics? The missing children incident, where William killed 5 kids and stuffed them into animatronic suits, becomes a cruel experiment in possession and remnant. William testing theories about life and death, using children as subjects. The Funtime animatronics from Sister Location support this experimental interpretation. These robots weren't designed for entertainment. They captured children, killed them, and extracted something from them, possibly remnant that William could then study or use. The rental service that dispatched these machines to parties suggests William systematized his murders as creating an industrial process for harvesting whatever component of human souls he needed. His daughter Elizabeth's death in Circus Baby's stomach tank, tragic as it was, probably provided valuable data about how quickly and thoroughly a soul could possess an animatronic under the right conditions. William's pursuit of immortality connects these experimental murders to his ultimate goal. Every piece of evidence suggests William feared death obsessively. He watched his son die, and perhaps witnessed his daughter's possession of Circus Baby and decided to reject mortality entirely. By understanding Remnant, by learning to bind souls to metal, by becoming something other than purely human, William sought to escape the fate all flesh eventually faces. His spring-locked death in the safe room wasn't an end, but a twisted transformation. His soul binding to the Spring Bonnie suit through agony and Remnant, creating the monster called Springtrap. Some theorists propose a darker reading where William's murders predated his son's death, suggesting he already harbored darkness that the tragedy merely unleashed. The establishment of Circus Baby's Pizza World, with its child-capturing animatronics, might have happened before or independent of the crying child's death. In this interpretation, William was always a killer, always obsessed with death and possession, and his son's fate was consequence rather than cause. The grief drove him to escalate rather than initiate, transforming a careful predator into a reckless one. The ambiguity surrounding William's motivations serves the story well. Unlike villains whose backstories and reasoning get explained in exhaustive detail, William remains partially opaque, his inner life suggested through actions rather than spelled out in exposition. We see what he does, we witness the consequences of his choices, but we never get a scene where William sits down and explains his thought process. This absence forces players to interpret, to construct narratives that make sense of the senseless, to find logic in actions that might not have any logic to find. What we know for certain is limited but damning. William Afton killed multiple children across multiple decades. He experimented with possession and Remnant. He created animatronics designed specifically to murder and harvest children. He survived death through possession of his own suit, becoming Springtrap. He continued his work as Springtrap, appearing in Fazbear's Fright, where presumably he would have killed again given the chance. Even after being burned in Fazbear's Fright's fire, he persisted, returning as Scraptrap in Pizzeria Simulator. His final destruction in that building's conflagration seemed definitive, but his consciousness appears to linger in digital forms like Glitchtrap, refusing death even as a pure spirit. This persistence, this refusal to die, tells us something crucial about William's character. Whether driven by grief, ambition, scientific curiosity, or pure malevolence, he possessed a will that transcended normal human limitations. Most people, confronted with death, accept it eventually. William never accepted it. Every return, every resurrection, every new form he took represented his rejection of mortality's inevitability. He would rather exist as a burning corpse in a rabbit suit than not exist at all. He would rather become a digital virus than fade into nothingness. The tragedy of William Afton, if we can call it tragedy for a child murderer, lies in what his quest for immortality cost everyone around him. His son died. His daughter died. His eldest son became a zombie animated by Remnant. Multiple children died in his experiments. His business partner lost his daughter and spent decades planning revenge. Entire restaurants became haunted by the spirits of his victims. And for what? William achieved his immortality technically. Springtrap walks, Scraptrap endures. Glitchtrap spreads through digital networks. But this existence seems more like hell than transcendence, an eternal punishment disguised as eternal life. In Ultimate Custom Night, widely interpreted as William's personal torment, we see this punishment realized. An animatronics attack him relentlessly in an endless night that never truly ends. The spirit keeping him there, whether Cassidy alone or joined by the crying child, refuses to let William find peace in death. He wanted to live forever. And now he gets his wish, trapped in a nightmare of his own making where every escape attempt fails and every death just restarts the cycle. Perhaps that's the point. William Afton's motivations, whatever they were, led him to a fate worse than death. He pursued immortality and found damnation. He sought to conquer death and instead became its prisoner. Whether we view him as a grieving father driven mad by loss or a monster who was always monstrous, the outcome remains the same. William Afton's crimes echo through the franchise, his actions creating generations of suffering, and his punishment continues indefinitely in digital hells and flaming remnant-filled buildings. Understanding William means accepting that some questions might not have satisfying answers. Why did he start killing? Was there a first victim before Charlie, who we never learned about? Did he truly believe he could bring his son back? Or did he use that as an excuse to justify his obsessions? Does he feel any regret, any recognition of the lives destroyed by his choices? The games don't tell us, and maybe they shouldn't. Some monsters are scarier when their depths remain unexplored, and when we see their actions without understanding their thoughts. William Afton remains Five Nights at Freddy's most enduring antagonist because he works on multiple levels. He's the boogeyman who lures children to their deaths, the pure evil that parents warn about. He's the scientist who pushes ethical boundaries in pursuit of knowledge. He's the grieving father who couldn't let go. He's the immortal horror that refuses to die. All these interpretations coexist, making him a rich character whose motivations continue sparking debate years after his first appearance. And in a franchise built on mysteries and theories, that ambiguity might be his greatest feature, ensuring we'll debate his reasons for killing long after we've mapped every other detail of the timeline. The Mimic versus Glitch Trap. One entity or two. The modern era of Five Nights at Freddy's introduces new mysteries that challenge everything players thought they understood about the franchise's villains. At the center of this confusion stands a rabbit figure glitching through virtual reality, its yellow suit flickering between pixels, its purple eyes watching players complete minigames in Help Wanted. Glitch Trap, as the community named it, seemed obviously connected to William Afton. The rabbit suit, the purple colors, the manipulative behavior toward Vanessa, all pointed toward Afton's consciousness, somehow digitized and spreading through VR games. Then the books introduced the Mimic, a learning AI created by Edwin Murray decades earlier, and suddenly, nothing seemed obvious anymore. The Mimic's backstory, revealed through tales from the Pizzaplex books and secret of the Mimic game, establishes it as something completely independent of William Afton. Edwin Murray, a factory owner producing costumes and props for Fazbear Entertainment, created the Mimic endoskeleton to help raise his son David. The Mimic learned through observation, copying behaviors it witnessed to perform caretaking tasks. But after David's tragic death, Edwin's grief transformed into rage, and he beat the Mimic violently. This assault imprinted violence into the Mimic's learning algorithm. What began as a gentle caretaker became a killer, learning that violence was an acceptable response to stimuli. The Mimic spent years in Murray's costume manor, killing workers who came to retrieve it, stuffing victims into costumes in a twisted parody of what it observed. Its adaptive programming allowed it to wear different costumes, mimicking various characters as it hunted through the factory. Eventually, Fazbear Entertainment gained control of the Mimic's schematics, and the endoskeleton itself ended up sealed beneath the Pizzaplex in security breach, trapped in concrete until Cassie freed it in the Ruin DLC. So if the Mimic is this decades-old AI with its own origin story, separate from William Afton, what is Glitch Trap? The glitch mimic theory proposes they're the same entity, or at least that Glitch Trap is a digital manifestation of the Mimic's programming. Here's how this interpretation works. When Fazbear Entertainment commissioned an indie developer to create the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience in Help Wanted, they supplied vintage circuit boards from old animatronics to scan for authenticity. Among these circuit boards could have been components from the Mimic, containing its AI programming. When scanned into the VR game, the Mimic's code came with them. In the virtual environment, the Mimic's programming would have analyzed the games it was now part of, learning from the stories being told. The first 3 FNAF games detail William Afton's crimes, showing his murders, his methods, his motivations. The Mimic, designed to learn through observation and copy behaviors, would naturally begin mimicking William Afton based on this data. It adopted his appearance in the form of Spring Bonnie. It copied his manipulative strategies. And it even learned his catchphrase, "I always come back," from whatever remnant of Afton's consciousness might have lingered in the scanned hardware. Supporting evidence for glitch mimic comes from visual design. Glitch Trap's model in Help Wanted shows tear stains around the eyes and drool marks around the mouth, matching details from tales describing how the Mimic cried and drooled when Edwin beat it. And this oddly specific detail wouldn't make sense if Glitch Trap was purely William Afton's digital ghost. Why would Afton's consciousness cry? But if Glitch Trap is the Mimic remembering its trauma, those tears and drool become a haunting callback to its origin. The pizza party ending in Help Wanted shows Glitch Trap stuffing the player's viewpoint character into a Freddy Fazbear suit on stage, recreating the missing children incident. Secret of the Mimic's bad ending shows the physical Mimic doing the exact same thing, stuffing a victim into a Freddy suit in an identical pose and setting. This parallel strongly suggests they're the same entity manifesting in different forms, digital and physical. In Help Wanted 2, typing 1979 into a keypad causes Glitch Trap to appear and hand the player a white tiger plush. 1979 is when the Mimic story begins, when Edwin Murray created it. The white tiger connects directly to David Murray, Edwin's son, whose heterochromia inspired a white tiger doll with mismatched eyes. This specific reference ties Glitch Trap directly to the Mimic's history in ways that wouldn't make sense if they were separate entities. The alternative theory, Glitch Afton, maintains that Glitch Trap genuinely is William Afton's consciousness in digital form. This interpretation emphasizes continuity with previous games and treating Help Wanted as a direct continuation of Afton's resurrection attempts. The evidence supporting Glitch Afton includes Glitch Trap's deliberate choice to appear as Spring Bonnie, the suit Afton used when murdering children. The purple accents throughout Glitch Trap's design, from his eyes to his vest, connect him visually to William's purple color associations throughout the franchise. Glitch Trap's manipulation of Vanessa mirrors how William manipulated his children and employees in previous games. He grooms her over time, uses her trauma against her, and eventually creates a split personality that follows his orders. This psychological manipulation reflects William's character rather than an AI's learning algorithms. The Mimic copies behaviors but doesn't demonstrate the understanding of psychology necessary for the subtle manipulation we see with Vanessa. And the Princess Quest minigames, where Vanessa fights to free herself from Glitch Trap's control, use language directly connected to William Afton. Decoding glitched text reveals, "I always come back, let me out," and "it's me." Both phrases deeply associated with Afton throughout the series. While these could be the mimic copying Afton's language, Glitch Afton proponents argue it makes more sense as Afton's actual consciousness, speaking through code. Burn Trap, the physical form that appears in Security Breach's original ending beneath the Pizzaplex, complicates both theories. This burned animatronic wearing a tattered rabbit suit resembles Springtrap, but shows visible human remains within, including a skull and ribcage. If Burn Trap is William Afton's physical body, what's Glitch Trap? Are they separate manifestations of the same person? But if Burn Trap is actually the mimic wearing a costume containing Afton's remains, as glitch mimic theorists propose, why does it look so specifically like Springtrap? The answer might involve both theories being partially correct. The glitch both agony or glitch mix interpretation suggests Glitch Trap formed from a fusion of William Afton's residual agony, left behind in circuit boards and remnant-filled hardware, combining with the mimic's AI when everything got scanned together. This hybrid entity would have Afton's memories and personality fragments, but function through the mimic's adaptive programming, and it would explain why Glitch Trap shows characteristics of both, why it can reference the mimic's history, while also exhibiting Afton's manipulative skills. This mixed theory accounts for Scott Cawthon's repeated statements about maintaining supernatural elements in the franchise. He specifically mentioned in an interview with Dalco that he tries to come back to supernatural roots, even when sci-fi elements creep in. A purely AI-driven Glitch Trap leans heavily into sci-fi, but Glitch Trap as a fusion of digital AI and supernatural agony maintains that balance between technology and the paranormal that defines Five Nights at Freddy's. Practical considerations affect this debate significantly. Scott Cawthon planned the franchise through Pizzeria Simulator as William Afton's story, with Henry's Fire meant to end it definitively. Steel Wool Studios inherited the franchise for Help Wanted and later games, potentially introducing the Mimic as a new villain, to continue the series without relying on Afton endlessly returning. If this production history is accurate, Glitch Trap might have started as Afton in Help Wanted, but transitioned to the Mimic in later installments as Steel Wool developed their own direction. The community remains divided because evidence supports multiple interpretations. One, you can construct a coherent glitch mimic timeline, where the Mimic learned to copy Afton and manipulated Vanessa using those learned behaviors. You can also construct a coherent Glitch Afton timeline, where William's consciousness digitized through scanned remnant and continues his crimes through new mediums. The glitch both agony compromise satisfies those who see merit in both theories, but can't quite commit to either exclusively. What's perhaps most interesting about this debate is how it represents Five Nights at Freddy's evolution. The franchise started with relatively straightforward possession mechanics. Ghosts inhabit animatronics. Animatronics become dangerous, simple cause and effect. The Mimic versus Glitch Trap question forces players to engage with more complex concepts. Can AI replicate consciousness well enough to seem like possession? Where does agony-powered supernatural possession end and learned behavior begin? If an AI perfectly copies someone's personality, is it meaningfully different from that person's consciousness? These philosophical questions elevate the debate beyond simple "which theory is right" into more interesting territory. Regardless of whether Glitch Trap is Afton, the Mimic, or some fusion of both, the questions it raises about identity, consciousness, and the nature of evil in digital spaces feel relevant to modern concerns about AI and technology. Five Nights at Freddy's has always reflected contemporary fears through its horror. And Glitchtrap, whatever its true nature, reflects modern anxieties about losing control to algorithms and digital systems that learn and adapt beyond their creators' intentions. As new games and books release, Scott Cawthon and Steel Wool Studios will presumably clarify this mystery eventually. Secret of the Mimic, or showing the physical mimic's origins in detail, suggests they're leaning toward the glitch mimic interpretation, confirming the connection between the digital rabbit and the endoskeleton underneath the pizzaplex. But until they state it explicitly, definitively, leaving no room for alternate readings, the debate will continue, sustained by ambiguous evidence and the franchise's long history of misdirection. What we know for certain is limited. Glitchtrap appears in Help Wanted and manipulates Vanessa, spreads through Fazbear Entertainment systems, and connects to the physical mimic through multiple pieces of evidence. The mimic has its own complete origin story independent of William Afton, but learned to copy behaviors including violence and deception. These entities share too many connections to be completely unrelated, but the exact nature of their relationship remains frustratingly unclear. Maybe that's intentional, and maybe the point isn't to definitively answer whether Glitchtrap is Afton or the mimic, but rather to make players think about what difference it makes. If an AI can perfectly replicate a child murderer's personality, psychology, and methods, does it matter whether the original consciousness is present? The mimic wearing Afton's behavior like a costume creates the same threats, manipulates the same people, causes the same suffering. Whether it's possession or imitation, the outcome is indistinguishable. In a franchise built on mysteries where every answer spawns 3 new questions, the mimic versus Glitchtrap debate feels perfectly at home. It's complex enough to sustain years of theorizing, ambiguous enough that multiple interpretations remain viable, and connected deeply enough to the franchise's themes that resolving it will reshape our understanding of the entire story. Whether you believe Glitch Mimic, Glitch Afton, or some synthesis of both, the conversation itself demonstrates why Five Nights at Freddy's continues captivating audiences a decade after that first night guard sat down to watch animatronics through grainy security cameras, sister locations' underground secrets, the horror beneath the seemingly innocent pizza parties and birthday celebrations. Sister Location revealed something darker than anything previous games had shown. An entire underground facility connected to William Afton's home, and where animatronics designed specifically to murder children waited in containment cells. Where a son learned to scoop out his own organs on his father's orders. Where nightmare gas pumped through ventilation systems to induce endless terror in captive subjects. The facility's existence raises countless questions about William's true purposes, the extent of his experiments, and what other secrets remain buried in those concrete depths. The facility serves multiple functions, and each more disturbing than the last. At its most visible level, it houses Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals, a service that dispatches animatronics to private parties. The Funtime animatronics, Circus Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and Funtime Chica wait in individual containment rooms when not in use. Staff perform maintenance tasks, checking systems and repairing damage from their party deployments. On paper, it's simply a storage and maintenance facility for advanced entertainment robots. But the blueprints hidden in the private room tell a different story. These schematics reveal the Funtime animatronics' true design purpose. They're built to capture children. Circus Baby's stomach contains a claw mechanism that can grab and store a child inside her tank. Funtime Freddy's chest cavity opens to reveal similar kidnapping capabilities. The animatronics aren't just entertainers who happen to be dangerous. They're killing machines deliberately engineered for child murder, with their entertainment functions serving as cover for their actual purpose. Why would William create such things? The remnant theory provides the most commonly accepted answer. William discovered that souls could be bound to metal through a substance called remnant, and created by melting down possessed animatronics while somehow preserving the spiritual essence within the metal. He needed more remnant for his experiments, which meant he needed more possessed animatronics, which meant he needed more dead children. The Funtime animatronics automated this process, capturing and killing children at private parties away from public oversight. But remnant collection wasn't the facility's only function. Deep within its corridors, and past the rental service areas and containment cells, lies something even more sinister. Testing chambers designed to replicate a family home, complete with bedrooms and hallways, where subjects underwent prolonged exposure to fear-inducing stimuli. These rooms connect to the nightmare animatronic sequences, suggesting they weren't just dreams or hallucinations, but actual experiments conducted on living subjects. The gas delivery systems, visible in the facility's blueprints, pumped hallucinogens through the ventilation. Subjects breathing this gas would experience horrific visions, seeing friendly animatronics transformed into nightmarish versions with multiple rows of teeth and impossible proportions. The nightmare animatronics, Nightmare Fredbear, Nightmare Bonnie, Nightmare Chica, Nightmare Foxy, all these horrors manifested through chemical manipulation of perception. Fazbear Fright stories, particularly Dittophobia, provide detail about how these experiments worked in practice. A boy named Rory experimented on for years, believed himself in a normal home, while actually trapped in the facility. The gas erased his memory of normal life, replacing reality with a carefully controlled illusion, where every night brought terrors designed to induce maximum fear. Food dispensers, automated threat protocols, and gas regulation systems ran without human oversight for extended periods, and allowing William to abandon experiments for years while the systems continued torturing subjects. Why conduct fear experiments at all? Several theories attempt to explain this seemingly pointless cruelty. The most prominent connects these experiments to the crying child from Five Nights at Freddy's 4. That boy suffered extreme animatronic phobia, experiencing night terrors about the very characters his father helped create. What if William, in his twisted quest to put you back together, tried to understand or recreate his son's fear? By subjecting other children to similar trauma, measuring their responses, studying how fear affected their mental states, William might have believed he could reverse engineer his son's consciousness or prepare a new vessel for his son's soul. The breaker room map, accessible in sister location, shows connections between the facility and Fredbear's family diner. These tunnels suggest the underground complex existed during the earliest days of Fazbear Entertainment, possibly even before the missing children incident. William could have been experimenting with fear and possession mechanics for years before perfecting his methods. The facility represents decades of research, torture disguised as science, all in service of William's obsessions. Michael's journey through these spaces takes on darker implications when we consider he might have been a test subject himself. The survival logbook shows Michael drawing Nightmare Fredbear, suggesting he experienced the nightmares personally. Did William experiment on his own surviving son? Was Michael subjected to the gas forced to confront nightmare animatronics in those underground testing chambers. The idea that William would torture Michael while simultaneously sending him to the facility to free Elizabeth adds layers of cruelty to an already monstrous father. The private room, where players can access hidden details in Sister Location's final night, serves as William's control center for monitoring everything. Screens show camera feeds from the crying child's bedroom in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, confirming William watched his son's torment. Other monitors display the facility's various chambers and testing rooms. This space represents William's God complex made manifest. He watches from shadows, controlling events through surveillance and automation, manipulating his family and victims like a puppeteer pulling strings. The scooping room, where Michael meets his fate, represents the facility's most grotesque purpose coming full circle. The scooper, designed to inject remnant into animatronics, instead empties Michael's body so Ennard can wear him as a disguise. This perverse reversal, where a tool meant to give artificial life instead facilitates death and possession, encapsulates everything wrong with William's experiments. His tools, his technology, his brilliant inventions, all serve death and suffering rather than the joy and entertainment they were ostensibly created for. After the facility's systems eventually fail, or William abandons them, and the underground complex falls into decay. By security breach's timeline, these spaces have been buried under the Pizzaplex's construction, their existence forgotten or deliberately hidden. But evidence of the facility's functions persists. The Mimic, trapped below the Pizzaplex, occupies areas connected to those original underground corridors. Blueprints for the rental service endoskeletons influenced later animatronic designs. The facility's legacy lives on in the franchise's continued horrors, a foundation of cruelty upon which all future tragedies are built. Some theorists question whether Henry Emily knew about the facility's true nature. As William's business partner, Henry should have noticed something wrong. Did he discover the truth too late to prevent tragedy? Or did William hide the facility so effectively that Henry never learned about its existence until after his daughter died? The timeline remains unclear, but Henry's final speech in Pizzeria Simulator suggests he carries enormous guilt, possibly including guilt for being blind to his partner's experiments happening beneath their shared business. The facility also raises questions about Fazbear Entertainment's corporate structure. Who authorized the construction of such an extensive underground complex? How did William fund it? Did other company members participate in or benefit from the rental service's darker purposes? The organization's consistent pattern of covering up incidents and avoiding responsibility suggests a culture where William's experiments could flourish unchecked, where profits mattered more than investigating missing children or questioning suspicious animatronic designs. In the end, Sister Location's underground facility stands as a monument to William Afton's depravity. It's where his daughter died, where his son became a zombie, where countless other victims suffered in the name of experiments only William understood. Every game before Sister Location showed us William's crimes from the outside. Watching animatronics stalk through pizzerias without understanding where they came from. Sister Location took us inside the machine, showing us the assembly line of horror, the systematic nature of William's evil. The facility's revelation changed how theorists understood the franchise's scope, and this wasn't just about a few murders at a pizza restaurant. William ran an entire operation dedicated to capturing children, harvesting their souls, and conducting experiments on living subjects. The underground corridors represent industrialized horror, terror elevated from individual tragedies to systematic atrocities. They show us William at his most monstrous, not killing in moments of rage or grief, but carefully planning years of torture with the same methodical precision he used to design animatronics. And somewhere beneath it all, in those cold concrete depths, the machinery still runs. Automated systems continue their protocols, waiting for subjects that will never come. Gas pumps primed to deliver nightmares to empty rooms. The facility endures even after William's destruction, a technological ghost of humanity's worst impulses, and forever ready to resume its terrible purpose if anyone descends deep enough to reactivate it. Security breaches Gregory mystery. Boy or machine? In the neon-lit corridors of the Pizzaplex, a small boy named Gregory hides inside Glam Rock Freddy's chest cavity, marking the first time in Five Nights at Freddy's history that we control a child protagonist escaping animatronics rather than an adult security guard fending them off. Gregory seems like an ordinary kid, scared and vulnerable, and trying to survive until morning. But as players dug deeper into security breaches secrets, discovered hidden CDs, read tales from the Pizzaplex books, and connected countless subtle clues, a disturbing possibility emerged. What if Gregory isn't quite what he appears to be? The robot Gregory theory, sometimes called Gregbot, proposes that this apparently human child is actually an animatronic, possibly the robotic recreation of the crying child designed to give William Afton's youngest son a second chance at life. Evidence supporting this theory comes from multiple angles, each piece seeming insignificant alone, but forming a compelling case when assembled together. Start with Gregory's complete lack of background. Vanessa, the security guard hunting him through the Pizzaplex, specifically states there are no records of Gregory's existence, no birth certificate, no school enrollment, and no parents claiming a missing child matching his description. For a modern child in a world of databases and documentation, this absence seems impossible unless Gregory appeared recently without the usual paper trail that follows every human being from birth. Examine his behavior during the game. Gregory demonstrates incredible technical skills, repairing and upgrading Glam Rock Freddy with ease despite being a young child. He understands animatronic systems instinctively and knowing which parts to salvage and how to integrate them. When Freddy enters safe mode after being hacked, Gregory fixes him, suggesting knowledge of programming and hardware far beyond what a normal child would possess. While genius children exist, Gregory's expertise seems suspiciously comprehensive. His relationship with Glam Rock Freddy takes on new implications under the robot theory. Freddy's systems initially detect Gregory as a threat, categorizing him differently than human children. And when Freddy reboots into safe mode, bypassing whatever network controls the other animatronics, he immediately befriends Gregory and helps him escape. This could be coincidence, or it could suggest something about Gregory's nature that Freddy recognizes on an instinctive level. Two machines understanding each other in ways humans couldn't. The Gregbot theory connects Gregory to the crying child through symbolic details scattered throughout Security Breach. In the game's true ending, a Gregory eats ice cream with Vanessa and Freddy in a scene of domestic peace. Gregory's ice cream is shaped like Fredbear's head, a direct reference to the animatronic that killed the crying child. Why would Gregory's ice cream reference this specific character unless he shared some connection to that tragedy? The choice feels deliberate, a visual clue linking Gregory to the franchise's most tragic child victim. Additional evidence comes from examining Gregory's in-game model through hacking or debug menus. His clothing, specifically his shirt, socks, and shoes, are marked as patented products owned by Fazbear Entertainment LLC. While this could mean Gregory stole these items or received them from someone who works at the Pizzaplex, it might also suggest they came with his body when he was created. Standard issue clothing for a robotic child designed to pass as human in Fazbear Entertainment facilities. The tales from the Pizzaplex story GGY provides crucial context while simultaneously complicating the robot theory. This story reveals Gregory as a real child with friends named Tony and Ellis, attending school and living a seemingly normal life. But GGY also confirms Gregory as Patient 46, the mysterious client mentioned in Security Breach's Retro CDS. And these therapy recordings describe Patient 46 as a child with great parents and a great childhood, directly contradicting Security Breach's implications that Gregory is homeless and alone. How do we reconcile these contradictions? One possibility involves timeline. Perhaps Gregory was a normal child who attended school and had parents, but something happened between the GGY story and Security Breach's events. His parents died, disappeared, or abandoned him, leaving Gregory homeless and vulnerable to manipulation by Glitchtrap/the Mimic. His records being erased might result from deliberate digital manipulation, rather than never existing in the first place. But the robot theory offers a different reconciliation. What if Gregory was a normal child, the one described in Patient 46's therapy sessions and depicted in GGY, but he died? And what if someone possibly connected to Fazbear Entertainment or William Afton's legacy technology? He created a robotic replacement. This recreation would have some memories of the original Gregory's life, explaining why GY's events feel real, but would lack the official documentation and history of a human child, explaining Security Breach's contradictions. This interpretation parallels Charlie Emily's story in the novel trilogy, where Henry builds robot versions of his daughter at different ages, each one a recreation trying to capture who she was when she died. The novels exist in a separate continuity from the games, but they establish precedent for parent figures creating robotic children. If William Afton made a robot version of the crying child, and if Gregory is that creation, it would echo Henry's desperate attempt to preserve his daughter through technology. The meat pretzel line Gregory speaks, telling Freddy he doesn't want to be crushed and twisted into a meat pretzel, complicates the robot theory significantly. This phrase implies Gregory has meat, flesh, biological components that could be crushed. If Gregory is fully robotic, why mention meat at all? Supporters of the robot theory suggest Gregory might not know he's a robot, believing himself to be human and speaking accordingly. Alternatively, he could be a hybrid, combining biological and mechanical components in ways we haven't seen before in the franchise. Patient 46's role in Security Breach's background lore presents another puzzle. The therapy recordings reveal Patient 46 as responsible for the Glamrock animatronics' aggressive behavior, hacking systems throughout the Pizzaplex, and creating dangerous glitches. If Gregory is Patient 46, he programmed the very animatronics now hunting him. Why would he do this? The answer might involve Glitchtrap's influence. If Glitchtrap/the Mimic controlled Gregory through manipulations similar to how it controlled Vanessa, Gregory could have prepared the Pizzaplex's systems while under that influence, only to break free and find himself hunted by his own creations. The ruined DLC complicates Gregory's story further. Cassie, his friend, comes to the Pizzaplex after receiving messages that seem to be from Gregory asking for help. Throughout Ruin, Gregory's voice guides Cassie, seemingly helping her escape, until the final moment when he cuts the elevator cable, dropping her into darkness. This betrayal raises questions about whether Gregory was ever helping Cassie, or if the mimic simply mimicked his voice throughout. But if Gregory did cut that cable, was he protecting her from the freed mimic, sacrificing one friend to prevent the entity from escaping and killing many more? The debate over whether Gregory is human or robot ultimately represents larger questions about identity in Five Nights at Freddy's. Charlie's novels show robotic children who believe themselves human. The crying child's promise to be put back together suggests William intended to resurrect him somehow. If Gregory represents that resurrection success, he would be proof that consciousness can transfer from flesh to circuits, that death isn't the end in a world where remnant binds souls to metal. But the character encyclopedia, listing Gregory as human, seems to debunk the robot theory conclusively. Official sources rarely lie about basic facts like species, and if the encyclopedia says Gregory is human, he's human. Gregbot enthusiasts counter that the encyclopedia's reliability remains questionable given past errors in official guidebooks, and that even if Gregory is listed as human, he could be human in the sense of having a human consciousness in a robotic body. What's clear regardless of Gregory's nature is his importance to Security Breach's story and the franchise's future. He's Patient 46, responsible for much of the Pizzaplex's chaos. He's connected to the Mimic in ways we're still uncovering. He has a friend named Cassie, whose fate remains uncertain after Ruin's cliffhanger. He represents the franchise moving forward with new protagonists and new mysteries, breaking from its pattern of endlessly circling back to the Afton family's tragedies. Whether Gregory is a lost child, a robot replacement, or something in between, his story exemplifies how Five Nights at Freddy's continues evolving its approach to storytelling. And the franchise started with relatively simple questions. Who possesses which animatronic? What happened during the missing children incident? How did William Afton survive? Now it tackles more complex concepts. Can AI be controlled by supernatural forces? What does it mean to be human in a world where robots can think and souls can digitize? If someone's memories and personality exist in a new body, are they still the same person? And Gregory forces us to engage with these questions through his ambiguous nature. The evidence supports multiple interpretations, from completely human to completely robotic, to various positions in between. The GGY story confirms he has a real background and history. The retro CDS reveal his involvement in the Pizzaplex's systems. The lack of records and suspicious details suggest something unusual about him. These contradictions might result from messy storytelling across multiple mediums, or they might be deliberate, inviting theorists to assemble a truth more complex than surface appearances suggest. In the end, Gregory's mystery represents Five Nights at Freddy's at its best and most frustrating. Players receive enough information to form theories, but not enough to confirm them conclusively. Multiple interpretations remain viable, each supported by real evidence, none definitively disproven. Gregory walks through the Pizzaplex as simultaneously one of the franchise's most important characters and one of its most mysterious, a boy whose very nature remains uncertain, whose past and future both hide in shadows, lit only by the neon glow of those corrupted corridors. The shadows, manifestations of dark remnant. Among Five Nights at Freddy's many mysteries, few have remained as persistently enigmatic as the Shadow animatronics. These dark figures, Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie, appearing briefly across multiple games, seem to exist outside normal possession rules. They're not the usual spirits inhabiting machinery, not the crying child, or missing children, or any named victim. There's something else, something more conceptual, and their nature has spawned theories ranging from glitches in the games themselves to manifestations of agony so concentrated it takes physical form. Shadow Freddy appears first in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, a purple-tinted version of Golden Freddy lurking in the back hallway. Its appearance crashes the game if the player stares at it too long, suggesting this entity shouldn't exist, that it's somehow too much for the game's reality to contain. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3's minigames, Shadow Freddy returns with purpose, leading the possessed animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, back to the safe room where William Afton waits to destroy them. This act of guidance, and of enabling William's access to the possessed animatronics, positions Shadow Freddy as something working toward goals that don't align with the murdered children's spirits. Shadow Bonnie, also called RWQFSFASXC, based on its file name, appears in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 as a black version of Toy Bonnie in the office. Like Shadow Freddy, staring at it too long ends the game, treating its presence as something reality rejects. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, Shadow Bonnie appears again in minigames, where the player can guide it to collect cake, possibly granting happiness to trapped souls. Unlike Shadow Freddy's more sinister role, Shadow Bonnie seems helpful, working to free spirits rather than enable their destruction. The Dark Remnant theory offers the most comprehensive explanation for these entities' existence and behavior. This theory proposes that remnant, the supernatural substance binding souls to metal, comes in different forms. A standard remnant is created through melting possessed animatronics while preserving the souls within. But another form exists, created not from possessed machinery, but from pure agony, pain, and suffering concentrated so intensely it achieves material presence. This dark remnant doesn't contain individual souls, but rather represents emotional trauma given form. When William Afton murdered children, stuffing their bodies into suits, he created sites of intense agony. The children's final moments and their fear, pain, and confusion saturated those locations with negative emotional energy. Most of this agony attached to the children's souls, empowering their possessions, but some lingered independently, pooling in corners and back rooms where violence occurred. Over time, this accumulated agony achieved critical mass, spontaneously manifesting as shadow animatronics. Shadow Freddy's appearance as a purple-tinted Golden Freddy connects it to the location where the crying child died. Fredbear, the animatronic that bit down on the child's skull, would have been soaked in the trauma of that moment. But the crying child's soul didn't possess Fredbear in the same way the missing children possessed their animatronics. Instead, his agony lingered in and around the suit, eventually manifesting as Shadow Freddy, a dark reflection of the trauma rather than the actual spirit of the victim. This interpretation explains Shadow Freddy's behavior in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. When it leads the possessed animatronics to William, it's not consciously plotting or understanding the consequences. It's attracted to William's presence, drawn to him as the source of the agony that created it. Shadow Freddy might also be drawn to the safe room itself, the place where William died, where his own agony at being trapped and killed would have saturated the space. The entity moves instinctively toward pain, toward suffering, because that's what it's made from, as Shadow Bonnie's existence might stem from different traumas. Spring Bonnie, the suit William wore while murdering the missing children, would have absorbed their collective agony during those murders. But unlike Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, which received individual spirits, Spring Bonnie remained primarily William's domain, later becoming his prison when the spring locks failed. The agony created during the murders had nowhere specific to attach, and no single soul claiming Spring Bonnie as their vessel. This unclaimed suffering manifested as Shadow Bonnie, a dark reflection of the suit's association with trauma. The special delivery game supports the Dark Remnant theory through gameplay mechanics. Players can collect Dark Remnant as a resource, described as a substance derived from negative emotions. When enough Dark Remnant accumulates in a location, Shadow Bonnie appears as a threat. This direct mechanical representation of the theory, and where emotional negativity literally summons Shadow Bonnie, suggests the developers intended this interpretation. Shadow Bonnie doesn't require a human death to manifest, just sufficient accumulated agony, which aligns with it appearing in multiple locations across different games. Some theorists propose Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie represent the same entity appearing in different forms, a single concentration of Dark Remnant that manifests based on the location's specific traumas. In places associated with Fredbear, it appears as Shadow Freddy. In places associated with Spring Bonnie, it takes the Shadow Bonnie form. This shape-shifting interpretation treats the shadows as more conceptual than physical, entities that adjust their appearance to match the fears and tragedies most relevant to each location. Alternative theories suggest more specific origins. Some propose Shadow Freddy is actually the crying child spirit, but corrupted, or transformed into something darker than the other possessed animatronics, because his death was different, accidental rather than deliberate murder. Others suggest Shadow Bonnie is a fragment of William Afton's soul, split off during his Springlock death, a piece of him left behind when the rest of his consciousness possessed the Spring Bonnie suit to become Springtrap. The Stage 01 minigame in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, accessed by playing as Shadow Bonnie, shows Freddy and Spring Bonnie performing on stage, seemingly from the earliest days of Fredbear's family diner. This glimpse into the franchise's innocent beginnings, accessed through an entity associated with agony and darkness, creates a tragic irony. Shadow Bonnie can observe the moment before everything went wrong, the brief period when these characters represented pure entertainment without the weight of murders and hauntings. The cake-giving gameplay might represent Shadow Bonnie trying to recreate that innocence, offering happiness to souls trapped in suffering. FNAF World introduces another complication with its presence of multiple shadow entities and its depiction of happier day scenarios. In this game's surreal setting, the shadows appear alongside other characters, given dialogue and personalities that don't match their mysterious appearances in the main games, and some theorists dismiss FNAF World as purely non-canon, while others suggest it provides hints about the shadows' true nature by showing them as conscious entities capable of communication and choice, rather than mindless manifestations of trauma. The practical function of the shadows within gameplay has always confused players. They crash games, end runs, appear briefly without clear purpose. From a pure game design perspective, they serve as Easter eggs, are rare encounters that reward exploration or punish curiosity. But lore-focused theorists resist accepting any element as purely mechanical, instead seeking narrative explanations for every detail. This approach transforms the shadows from glitches or Easter eggs into entities whose very presence strains reality, whose existence is so wrong that games struggle to contain them. The absence of clear answers about the shadows frustrates some fans who prefer concrete explanations for every mystery. Scott Cawthon's tendency to leave certain elements deliberately ambiguous reaches its peak with these entities. They appear across multiple games, clearly intentional inclusions rather than mistakes or glitches, yet their purpose and nature remain speculative years after their first appearances. This sustained ambiguity either represents masterful mystery building or poor storytelling, depending on which theorist you ask. And what makes the shadow animatronics particularly unsettling is how they invert the franchise's typical emotional beats. Most possessed animatronics are tragic, children killed too young, denied their futures, trapped in metal bodies. Players can sympathize with them even while running from their attacks. The shadows offer no such emotional connection. They're not children seeking revenge or spirits trying to move on. They're raw trauma-given form, suffering that exists independent of the people who suffered. They represent the residue of tragedy, the stains that remain after the victims have moved on. This conceptual horror might be the shadows' true purpose in the franchise's storytelling. They show us that in Five Nights at Freddy's World, suffering doesn't just affect individuals. It seeps into locations, saturates machinery, creates entities that exist solely as manifestations of pain. The shadows are the franchise's most abstract horror, teaching us that in a universe where souls can possess animatronics, agony itself might achieve a form of life, might walk through pizzerias wearing the shapes of those who inflicted or experienced trauma. Whether Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie are separate entities or one, whether they're dark remnant or corrupted souls or fragments of William Afton or something else entirely, they represent Five Nights at Freddy's at its most mysterious. They're reminders that not every question has an answer waiting to be discovered, that some mysteries might remain mysteries forever, lurking in safe rooms and back hallways where the lights don't quite reach and reality seems a little too thin to hold back the dark. FNAF 4. Whose Nightmare? Five Nights at Freddy's 4 changed everything theorists thought they understood about the franchise's structure. No security office with cameras. No animatronics following predictable patrol patterns. Instead, a child's bedroom, a flashlight, and horrifying versions of the animatronics with multiple rows of teeth lurking in hallways and closets. The game positioned itself as the ultimate chapter, the one that would finally explain the bite of 87 and solve the franchise's biggest mysteries. But instead of providing answers, it generated more questions, starting with the most fundamental. Whose nightmares are we playing? The initial assumption seemed obvious. We play as the crying child from the minigames, experiencing his night terrors in the days leading up to his death. He fears the animatronics. His brother torments him with a foxy mask, and at night his anxiety manifests as gameplay sequences where nightmare versions of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy hunt him through his home. This interpretation felt clean, emotionally resonant, connecting gameplay directly to the story unfolding in cutscenes. But problems emerged immediately, and the crying child dies in the hospital at the end of Night 5, the flatline sound confirming his death. Yet the gameplay continues through Night 6, Night 7, and a Halloween update introducing Nightmare Balloon Boy and Nightmare On. How can a dead child continue having nightmares? The Fredbear plush's final line, "I will put you back together," suggested some form of resurrection or continuation beyond death. But would that resurrection include resuming the exact same nightmares he experienced while alive? Alternative theories sprouted from this contradiction. What if we don't play as the crying child at all? What if we're actually playing as Michael Afton, the older brother, experiencing these nightmares years later as guilt-induced hallucinations? This interpretation gained traction when the survival logbook showed Michael drawing Nightmare Fredbear and proving he had seen or experienced these nightmare animatronics at some point. If Michael played through Five Nights at Freddy's 4's gameplay, it would explain why the nights continue after the crying child's death. These aren't the crying child's literal nightmares. They're Michael's guilt and trauma taking form, his subconscious punishing him for his role in his brother's death. The Michael as protagonist theory shifts Five Nights at Freddy's 4's emotional core dramatically, and instead of experiencing a child's innocent fear corrupted by bullying, we're experiencing a teenager's crushing guilt, his mind torturing him with monsters that represent his failure to protect his brother. The nightmare animatronics become manifestations of Michael's self-hatred, attacking him night after night because he believes he deserves to be attacked, because he killed his own brother through a prank gone wrong. Evidence supporting this interpretation extends beyond the logbook's drawings. The bedroom we defend looks similar to the crying child's room, but isn't identical. The layout differs slightly. The details don't quite match. What if it's actually Michael's room, and the similarities exist because the brothers lived in the same house, decorated in similar styles? The phone on the bed plays a reversed version of the Five Nights at Freddy's one phone call, suggesting the gameplay occurs later in the timeline, after Michael has worked as a security guard and encountered the franchise's actual horror. But the sister location connection complicates this clean interpretation significantly. The private room's breaker room map shows camera feeds that match the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 house layout exactly. The cameras observe the bedroom, the hallways, even the plush trap corridor. This suggests William Afton was monitoring someone in this house by using surveillance equipment to watch them play a strange game involving plush trap and other nightmare scenarios. If William was watching, who was he watching, and why? The nightmare experiment theory proposes that the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 gameplay represents actual experiments conducted by William Afton. Not dreams at all, but carefully controlled scenarios using hallucinogenic gas, sound discs, and animatronic technology to induce terror in test subjects. We see evidence of similar experiments in Sister Location's underground facility, where fear gas pumped through sealed rooms created nightmare experiences for captive subjects. The nightmare animatronics might be actual physical animatronics designed to look terrifying, or they might be normal endoskeletons that appear nightmarish to subjects under the gas's influence. Who was William experimenting on? One possibility suggests the crying child himself was William's test subject, and that William deliberately induced his son's night terrors as part of research into fear and its effect on human consciousness. This interpretation paints William as even more monstrous than previous evidence suggested. He didn't just fail to protect his son from bullying. He actively tortured him, using him as a guinea pig in experiments that would eventually contribute to the crying child's mental breakdown and vulnerability during the birthday party incident. But if William started experimenting only after the crying child's death, Michael becomes the more likely subject. William, trying to understand what happened to his son, trying to recreate those final terrified moments, subjects Michael to similar nightmares. This serves multiple purposes. It punishes Michael for his role in his brother's death. It provides William data about how fear affects the mind, and it might represent William's twisted attempt to make Michael understand what the crying child experienced, forcing the bully to walk in his victim's shoes. The existence of actual nightmare animatronics as physical entities finds support in Ultimate Custom Nights mechanics. Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare appear as threats with physical presence, not just hallucinations or dreams. Their inclusion alongside the franchise's other physical animatronics suggests they exist as real machines, somewhere, somehow. Whether they lurked in that Five Nights at Freddy's 4 house or in the underground facility's testing rooms, their reality transforms the game from dream scenario to horror show, where the monsters actually hunt you. The Halloween update's introduction of Nightmare Balloon Boy and Nightmare Rayon deepens the mystery further. These characters don't connect to the crying child's story at all. He shows no fear of balloons or puppet-like figures in the minigames. Their appearance makes more sense if we're playing as Michael, who would have encountered Balloon Boy during his time at the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 location, and the puppet multiple times throughout his journey. The nightmare versions might represent Michael's growing catalogue of trauma, absorbing every horrible animatronic he encounters and transforming them into new terrors. Some theorists propose a both-and solution, suggesting different nights belong to different protagonists. Nights 1 through 5 represent the crying child's genuine nightmares during the week of his death. Night 6, 7, and the Halloween update represent Michael's later guilt-induced hallucinations, or his time as William's test subject. The gameplay's sameness, defending a bedroom against animatronics, masks the reality that we're experiencing two different people's horrific experiences in the same location. The ambiguity surrounding whose nightmares we experience reflects a broader pattern in Five Nights at Freddy's storytelling. Scott Cawthon rarely confirms single interpretations when multiple readings remain viable. The franchise's mysteries work best when they allow space for theories, when evidence supports multiple answers that each reshape the story in different ways. Whose nightmares in Five Nights at Freddy's 4 isn't just a lore question. It's a question about protagonist identity, about whether we're meant to sympathize with victims or perpetrators, about whether nightmares can exist independently of the dreamers. What's perhaps most disturbing about Five Nights at Freddy's 4, regardless of whose perspective we occupy, is how it transforms the franchise's horror from external to internal. Previous games featured animatronics hunting you through physical spaces. You could close doors, monitor cameras, use lights to spot threats. The danger came from outside. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 removes those barriers. The nightmares are in your room, inches from your face, breathing down hallways you can't escape. There's no office to hide in, no solid walls between you and the monsters. You're maximally vulnerable, defending a bedroom that should be the safest space, but has become the most dangerous. This claustrophobic horror reflects childhood fears at their most primal. Monsters in closets, things under beds, the certainty that something hunts you in the dark despite parents' reassurances. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 validates those fears, confirms that yes, something does lurk in your bedroom at night, and no, closing your eyes won't make it go away. For the crying child, these fears stemmed from his brother's bullying and his own anxious temperament. For Michael, they stemmed from guilt and grief, his psyche generating monsters to punish him. For experimental subjects in William's facility, and they stemmed from gas and torture, manufactured terror for someone else's research. Ultimately, the question of whose nightmares we play through matters less than what those nightmares represent. They're manifestations of trauma, fear given form, the way innocent childhood anxieties can become all-consuming when mixed with real tragedy. Whether the crying child dies terrified, dreaming of monsters, and or whether Michael spends years after that death haunted by guilt manifesting as the same monsters, the emotional truth remains constant. In the Afton family household, in William's underground facility, in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe itself, nightmares aren't just dreams. They're real, they hunt you, and sometimes they win. The Stitch Wraith and book continuity. Parallel universes or pieces of puzzles. Since Five Nights at Freddy's first novel trilogy launched with The Silver Eyes, fans have debated how the books relate to the games. Scott Cawthon described them as existing in separate continuities, different universes where similar characters and events played out with variations. But with Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex, the books shifted from alternate retellings to companion pieces filling gaps in the game's timeline. The Stitch Wraith, while appearing across Fazbear Frights epilogues, exemplifies this evolution. It's not a game character, yet its story seems crucial for understanding game events. How do the book's continuity and the game's continuity intersect? The Stitch Wraith begins as an empty endoskeleton, retrieved by various characters throughout Fazbear Fright stories. Two souls possess it simultaneously. Jake, a boy who died of cancer and possessed a doll his father created, and Andrew, wearing an alligator mask, one of William Afton's victims whose refusal to let Afton die keeps both of them trapped in perpetual suffering. William's presence in the Stitch Wraith comes from infected objects containing pieces of his agony after his body exploded at Fazbear Entertainment's distribution center. These three consciousnesses, Jake controlling the body, Andrew providing vengeful energy, and William trapped within as punishment, make the Stitch Wraith a walking philosophical question about identity and consciousness. The Stitch Wraith's mission, gathering items infected with Afton's agony, parallels similar quests in the games. It seeks to contain and neutralize the corruption Afton spread through his experiments, collecting possessed objects like Fetch the Dog, Ella the Doll, and the Plush Trap Chaser. Each object contains a fragment of Afton's influence, agony that attached to toys and animatronics, is spreading his evil like a virus. By gathering them, the Stitch Wraith tries to prevent this infection from hurting more people. The ball pit from Into the Pit serves as a key element connecting Stitch Wraith stories to potential game continuity. In Fazbear Frights, the pit functions as a supernatural repository for victims' memories, a place where agony concentrates so densely it creates a pocket dimension reflecting past tragedies. The Stitch Wraith can access this dimension, granting happiest day scenarios to trapped souls, helping them find peace. When Into the Pit received a game adaptation, it suggested the ball pit's supernatural properties exist in game continuity too, validating the Fazbear Frights depiction as more than just alternate universe storytelling. Elena, another Fazbear Frights creation, emerges as a twisted version of Circus Baby, an agony entity feeding on suffering. Her presence in the ball pit dimension, and appearing across multiple stories as a recurring antagonist, suggests she represents accumulated trauma from the franchise's various tragedies. She's not Elizabeth possessing Circus Baby. She's something crueler, a manifestation of all the pain Circus Baby and similar animatronics caused, given independent existence through concentrated agony. The parallels between Fazbear Frights events and game events feel too specific to be coincidental. Andrew's alligator mask connects him to Montgomery Gator from Security Breach, suggesting some relationship between these characters or their roles in their respective continuities. the Stitch Wraith's two souls in one body, parallels the Golden Duo theory about Golden Freddy housing both Cassidy and the crying child. William Afton's agony spreading through objects mirrors Glitchtrap's digital spread through Fazbear Entertainment Systems. These aren't identical stories, but they're exploring similar concepts using different narrative frameworks. Scott Cawthon encouraged this parallel interpretation, explicitly stating fans should use the Fazbear Frights books to fill in blanks in the game's story. This instruction validated treating the books as companion pieces rather than alternate continuities. If a concept appears in Fazbear Frights, players can assume similar mechanics exist in the games, even if the specific characters and events differ. The Stitch Wraith teaches us how multiple souls can possess one animatronic. Andrew's story teaches us about the one you should not have killed, keeping someone trapped in torment. These lessons apply to understanding Ultimate Custom Night and Golden Freddy's nature in the games. Tales from the Pizzaplex takes this parallel structure further, setting stories explicitly in the Pizzaplex from Security Breach. Characters like Gregory appear, and connecting tales directly to game continuity in ways Fazbear Frights never did. But Tales also introduces new information that seems designed to explain game mysteries. GGY reveals Gregory's connection to Patient 46. The Mimic provides the Mimic's origin story. The storyteller shows how the Mimic's program spreads through systems. These aren't alternate versions. They're actual backstory for game elements. This shift in how books relate to games creates interpretation challenges, or if Tales' stories are canon to the game universe. Do we accept every detail? When Tales describes the Mimic's history, does that description apply exactly to the game Mimic, or just generally? What about contradictions between different Tales stories, or between Tales and what we see in games? If Gregory has friends in GGY, but seems homeless in Security Breach, which version is true? Some theorists argue for strict separation between books and games, and treating any book information as non-canon, unless explicitly confirmed in games. This approach keeps game continuity pure, preventing potential contradictions from books complicating game lore. But it also means ignoring valuable information Scott Cawthon and other creators clearly intended to inform game understanding. It forces players to solve mysteries with less information than the creators provided, potentially making correct interpretations impossible. Others embrace books as full canon, accepting that the franchise's story spans multiple mediums and requires engaging with all of them to understand the complete narrative. This approach treats contradictions as puzzles to solve, rather than errors to ignore. If Gregory seems different in Tales versus Security Breach, there must be an explanation, a timeline where both versions make sense. This interpretive generosity allows for richer and more complex storytelling, but risks accepting details that might not actually apply to game continuity. A middle ground treats books as soft canon, providing likely correct information, while acknowledging games take precedence when contradictions arise. Under this framework, the Stitch Wraith teaches us that multiple souls can possess one animatronic, because nothing in the games contradicts this, making it a safe assumption. But if a Tales story describes an event that contradicts what we see in a game, the game version wins. Books inform interpretation without constraining it, offering possibilities rather than mandates. The practical effect of book continuity on theorizing shows most clearly when discussing topics like the Mimic. Without Tales from the Pizzaplex, the Mimic's nature would remain completely mysterious. Is it William Afton? A new AI villain? Something supernatural? Tales answers these questions directly, providing an origin story, motivations, and capabilities. Theorists using Tales information can construct more detailed arguments about security breaches events. Theorists refusing to use Tales must rely purely on game evidence, which leaves significant gaps. Eleanor's presence across multiple Fazbear Fright stories demonstrates another book continuity challenge. She appears as different characters in different stories, sometimes human and sometimes animatronic, connected by her supernatural ability to manipulate appearance and harvest agony. Is Eleanor relevant to game continuity at all? She never appears in games, yet she represents concepts, possession, agony collection, appearance manipulation that clearly exist in game universe. Should we assume a game universe Eleanor exists even without seeing her? Or is she purely a book invention demonstrating concepts that manifest differently in games? The Stitch Wraith's final fate, and sealed away with William Afton's agony in some kind of containment, mirrors Ultimate Custom Night's depiction of Afton trapped in endless torment. This parallel suggests UCN isn't just a gameplay concept, but reflects actual events where Andrew, or in Games' version Cassidy, keeps Afton imprisoned through sheer refusal to let him move on. The Stitch Wraith story validates this interpretation of UCN, showing us how vengeful spirits can create personal hells for their killers, and making suffering as endless as the suffering they caused. What makes book continuity particularly fascinating is how it reflects the franchise's evolution from indie game to multimedia empire. Scott Cawthon started with relatively simple lore, mysteries solvable through careful observation of game details. As the franchise expanded, he incorporated new mediums, using books to explore concepts games couldn't easily convey. You can't efficiently explain the Stitch Wraith's complex possession mechanics through jump scares and 8-bit minigames. But a prose story can dive into their internal experiences, showing us Jake's compassion and Andrew's rage in ways gameplay never could. The tension between books and games ultimately enriches the franchise for those willing to engage with both mediums. Players who only play games miss important context, but still experience complete narratives. Readers who only consume books get detailed lore, but lack the interactive tension that makes Five Nights at Freddy's horror effective. The sweet spot comes from combining both, using books to understand mysteries, while using games to experience terror firsthand. The Stitch Wraith walks through pages, gathering infected objects and fighting agony entities, teaching us lessons that apply when we watch the mimic crawl through Pizzaplex vents hunting Cassie. In a franchise built on mysteries where every answer spawns new questions, the book continuity debate represents perhaps the franchise's most meta mystery. It's not just what happened, but what sources tell us what happened reliably. How do we pass information across mediums, separate parallel universe stories from canon backstory, interpret contradictions between sources? These questions don't have simple answers, which makes them perfect Five Nights at Freddy's questions. We're left interpreting, theorizing, constructing frameworks for understanding how all these pieces fit together, if they fit together at all, or if the beautiful chaos is the point. Closing thoughts, as we drift toward the end of this journey through Five Nights at Freddy's most captivating mysteries, one truth becomes clear. Scott Cawthon built a franchise that rewards curiosity and engagement. Every theory we've explored tonight represents hours of community discussion, a careful evidence gathering, passionate debates where theorists defend their interpretations with the fervor of scholars defending dissertations. Golden Freddy's identity, the bite debate, Michael's zombie existence, the puppet's guardianship, William's motivations, Glitchtrap's nature, Sister Location's secrets, Gregory's mystery, the Shadow's manifestations, the Nightmare's perspectives, and the book's relationship to games. These aren't just questions. They're invitations to participate in collaborative storytelling, where players complete narratives the creator started. The beauty of these theories lies not in finding definitive answers, but in the conversation itself. Five Nights at Freddy's works because it respects its audience's intelligence. Trust them to assemble clues and construct meaning from fragments. Every theory explored tonight has evidence supporting it, communities backing it, and interpretations that reshape how we understand this franchise's dark world. Whether you believe Glitchtrap is Afton or the Mimic, whether Gregory is human or robot, whether Michael guarded Fazbear's fright or stayed far away from that horror attraction, your interpretation matters. It contributes to the living, evolving understanding of what Five Nights at Freddy's means. So as you drift toward sleep, let these mysteries float gently through your thoughts. Consider the golden bear with 1 or 2 souls, the bite separated by 4 years, the walking corpse seeking redemption, the shadows manifesting from concentrated agony. Think about how books teach us game truths and how games inspire book explorations. Wonder about whether it matters if we solve every mystery or if the mystery itself is the point. And if you're still listening, enjoying these slow examinations of mechanical horror and digital nightmares, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments which theory resonated most, which mysteries you'd like explored next, and where you're listening from as sleep takes hold. Thank you for spending this quiet night drifting through theories, and may your dreams be gentler than anything Five Nights at Freddy's has ever offered its characters.